In the darkness between worlds, where eternal light and infinite void waged their ceaseless war, a single spark streaked across the cosmos. It was a dying world's last hope, a child cast from a broken planet far beyond the twisting nether. Krypton, a distant realm of science and light, perished in fire, yet from its doom flew a solitary vessel bearing an infant across the great dark of space. For long years that tiny ship journeyed among the stars, guided by fate or perhaps by the unseen hand of providence. Finally, on a night when Azeroth's 2 moons hung silver in the sky, that vessel pierced the heavens like a falling star. All across Azeroth, from the golden spires of Stormwind to the frozen pinnacle of Icecrown, eyes turned heavenward as a new star flared and plummeted. The omen etched a streak of hope and dread across the sky. At last, the burning vessel struck Earth with a thunderous crescendo in the eastern Plague Lands, a blighted land of ash and sorrow, where the soil itself wept from the scourge's cruel touch. The crash shook the diseased forests. Trees were charred to cinders from the impact, and a crater smoked in the corrupted soil. Silence followed, broken only by the crackle of dying flames and the distant moan of undead wandering that cursed land. From the smoldering wreckage rose a figure draped in tattered blue cloth and a scorched red cloak, remnants of the swaddling he had worn since infancy, now the battle-scarred cape of a voyager. He was no demon nor undead, but a man. Yet not a man as Azeroth had ever known. Broad-shouldered and tall, with eyes that glowed like blue suns, he bore upon his chest a strange symbol, an angular S in a shield, the crest of his lost home, meaning hope in a language no soul on Azeroth knew. This last son of a dead world had come of age during his voyage, nourished by the ambient rays of countless stars. Bathed now in Azeroth's golden sun, he felt strength surging anew in his limbs. Though a stranger to this realm, his heart was pure and unyielding in its moral gravity. In time, he would come to be known as Superman. But on this day, the people of Azeroth had no name for the star-born marvel their eyes beheld. He looked upon the blighted land around him, the sickly gray trees, the tainted earth where nothing wholesome grew. A foul wind carried the stench of decay. Kal-El, the name his birth parents gave him, furrowed his brow. Though he knew not this world, he recognized the aura of evil and suffering. Where had fate brought him? His keen senses, sharper than any mortal's, picked up distant cries, the whimpering of someone in pain. Without hesitation, the stranger from the stars moved toward the sound, eyes blazing with determined compassion. At the edge of the crater lay the ruins of a forgotten chapel, once a holy site now overrun by shambling dead. A handful of frightened villagers had barricaded themselves inside, and through cracked doors Kal-El saw ghouls and skeletons clawing at the makeshift fortifications. These monstrosities were soldiers of the Scourge, an undead army of unspeakable horror. The survivors' frail barricade was moments from giving way under the onslaught of bone and rot. Suddenly, with a boom like a thunderclap, the stranger interposed himself between the dead and the living. The ghouls shrieked, momentarily stunned by the sudden arrival of this red-caped protector who moved faster than their dull minds could register. The survivors peering from the chapel gasped as they beheld a man lift an undead brute off the ground with his bare hands. Kal-El's eyes burned with righteous light as twin beams of red heat lanced forth, scouring undead flesh to ash. In that instant, hope, long lost in these lands, was rekindled. Thus began the first battle on Azeroth for the Man of Steel, one man against a swarm of the dead. He moved through the pack of undead with otherworldly grace and terrifying power, every blow shattering bone and decayed sinew. A towering abomination, a grotesque giant sewn together from corpses, lumbered forward, swinging a rusted cleaver. Kal-El caught the cleaver mid-swing, steel shattered against his palm like glass. With a single mighty heave, he hurled the hulking corpse giant aside. It crashed to the ground with earth-shaking force. Above, the heavens roiled. The crash and sudden burst of holy power had not gone unnoticed by darker forces. From the spire of ice-crowned citadel far to the north, the Lich King's cold gaze turned toward the Plaguelands. Sensing a disturbance, he extended his will, sending forth more Scourge minions to investigate. Geists and gargoyles unlatched from ancient arches and flapped into the sky, shrieking as they dive-bombed toward the ruined chapel. In the shadows of the trees, necromancers in tattered robes began chanting spells to snare or slay the living meteor that had fallen in their midst. Kal-El had never faced magic before, but he stood undaunted. As a stone-skinned gargoyle swooped low, he leapt skyward with a bound that sent him soaring above the battlefield. The winged horror screeched in surprise as the caped hero met it mid-air, driving his fist through its enchanted granite form. One by one, the fell bats and gargoyles were smashed from the sky, crumbling to dust on the corrupted earth. Seeing their aerial attack fail, the necromancers hissed in unison and unleashed bolts of sickly green shadow frost. The crackling spells struck Kal-El, enveloping him in an aura of deathly chill. Pain lanced through his veins. These dark magics clawed at the very life force within him. It felt as if, for an instant, his strength faltered under a red sun, but the man of steel endured. With a roar like a wrathful god, he unleashed his heat vision in sweeping arcs, melting the very air with brilliance. Two necromancers were caught in the beams and disintegrated. Their unholy existence ended in a flash of light. The remaining deathcasters, now fearful, ordered their skeletal infantry to swarm this invincible foe. But the time for shambling bones had passed. In a blur of red and blue, Kal-El rushed through the horde. Each punch landed with the force of a battering ram. Skeletons exploded into showers of bone dust. Ghouls wailed as they were sent hurtling back into the darkness from whence they came. In mere moments, the battlefield fell silent save for the crackle of burning thatch from the ruined chapel. Slowly, the chapel's wooden door creaked open. The surviving villagers, gaunt and wide-eyed, emerged to behold their savior. To them, this red-caped stranger stood shining amid the desolation like a hero from an ancient legend. Some wept with joy, for in him they saw deliverance where they had expected only death. A scarred old paladin of the Argent Crusade, gravely wounded but alive thanks to the stranger's intervention, fell to one knee in awe. He had fought the Scourge his entire life and never witnessed such might. "Light? Bless you, stranger," the paladin gasped, voice trembling with gratitude. Though he sensed no divine spell upon this man, he could feel a presence, as if the light itself walked with the outsider. Kal-El gently helped the knight stand, humble despite his power. "I am no angel," he said softly, steadying the man. "Just a traveler, one who will not see innocents harmed." His voice was calm and kind, carrying an earnestness that transcended any language barrier. Somehow, in the meeting of eyes and the reassuring tone, the people understood his intent. They felt an aura of goodness about him as tangible as the warmth of the morning sun. Word of this celestial champion spread swiftly across the Plaguelands and beyond. Whispers carried by refugees and Argent Crusaders spoke of a sky knight clad in blue and red, a man whom no blade could pierce, who wielded the fire of the sun to vanquish the dead. Some called him a savior sent by the holy light itself. Others murmured he might be a new kind of demon, or a deception crafted by the Lich King. Yet as more first-hand accounts from reputable soldiers reached the ears of leaders and common folk alike, it became clear that whatever this being was, Azeroth's delicate balance of power was about to change. Far to the north, in the frozen halls of Icecrown, the Lich King brooded upon his frozen throne. Arthas Menethil, the Dark Lord of the Scourge, had felt the sudden glimmer of light that obliterated his minions. It burned his undead senses like a thorn of sunlight. Through the eyes of his remaining servants, he beheld the outsider's victory. The Cold King's gauntleted hand tightened around the hilt of the runeblade Frostmourne, which hungered for the soul of this intruder. "Let him come," Arthas whispered, his voice echoing in the frost-rimmed silence. A cruel smile played on his blue-white lips. If this man was truly of the light, Arthas yearned to break him, to snuff out that radiance. Soon, the Lich King promised to the shadows, all souls end in Icecrown. He will be no different. In the bowels of the citadel, the Scourge legions stirred restlessly, eager for the command to be unleashed. Recognizing the need for answers and unity, the Argent Crusade called for a convocation at Light's Hope Chapel. This was hallowed ground, a small chapel amid a field of bones, one of the few places the Scourge had never conquered, protected by the prayers of the righteous and the holy relics buried beneath. Messengers were dispatched to both the Alliance and the Horde, urging them to send representatives. A new power had entered the war against the Lich King, one that could upset the fate of nations, and all had a stake in deciding how to respond. Within the humble wooden chapel, lit by flickering candles and the soft glow of holy wards, an uneasy gathering of the world's leaders assembled. The air was thick with incense and tension. High Lord Tirion Fordring, bearer of the sacred Ashbringer and leader of the Argent Crusade, stood at the head of a rough-hewn table. His face, weathered by age and countless battles, was grave but resolved. To Tyrion's right sat King Varian Wrynn of Stormwind, High King of the Alliance, a tall, lion-hearted man clad in royal plate, the weight of his crown evident in his measured gaze. Beside Varian loomed Prophet Velen of the Draenei, the ancient priest-seer leaning on his crystalline staff. His luminous eyes reflected both sorrow and hope, for his people had themselves arrived on Azeroth as exiles from the stars. On Tyrion's left stood High Overlord Saurfang, the venerable orc warrior representing the Horde in place of its absent war chief. Scarred and grizzled, Saurfang had dueled death itself on countless fields. Yet here he stood shoulder to shoulder with old human enemies for the sake of a greater threat. At the edge of the circle, partially veiled in the chapel's shadows, lurked Lady Sylvanas Windrunner, the Banshee Queen of the Forsaken. Her posture was skeptical, arms folded across black leather armor, red eyes narrowed beneath her dark cowl. Few present trusted Sylvanas, but as ruler of Lord Iran's fallen kingdom, she had demanded to witness any discussions about what transpired on her plague-touched lands. Tirion raised a mailed hand for silence, and the murmurs of assembled knights, generals, and counselors died away. We face a moment of prophecy and peril. The High Lord began, his resonant voice filling the chapel. A champion has fallen from the heavens into our darkest lands. By his hand, innocents were spared a cruel fate. His clear gaze swept over Alliance blue and Horde red tabards alike. Yet with this salvation comes uncertainty. The Lich King will not suffer such a challenge unanswered. The question before us is simple. How shall we meet this dawn of a new power? With unity or with fear and division? A heavy silence followed. King Varian was first to respond, the wolf contained in his heart evident in his growling tone. High Lord, unity is easily spoken of here under hallowed ground, he said. But I would be a fool to blindly trust a being of unknown origin and intent. This Kal-El, as I'm told he calls himself, why should we assume his aims align with ours? What if he is a weapon sent by the Burning Legion, or a trick of the Lich King himself? Varian's gauntleted fist tightened on the table. Ever the protective monarch, he imagined the devastation an unrestrained juggernaut could wreak if turned against his people. The Prophet Velen inclined his head, his voice gentle yet firm. I have communed with the light regarding this matter. I sense no malice or deception in the one called Kal-El. In fact, I believe his arrival was foretold. Velen's eyes drifted upward as if recalling a vision. Long ago, the Naru spoke of a child of the stars wrapped in light's embrace, a beacon who would arrive in an hour of need. He is neither demon nor scourge nor any pawn of the void. I am convinced he is exactly what he appears to be, a benevolent soul granted great power. A derisive laugh echoed from Sylvanas. Benevolent? All souls can be broken. The Banshee Queen's words fell like drops of poison into the hall. She stepped forward into the candlelight, her face an alabaster mask of skepticism. Power is never innocent, prophet. If this Superman truly carries the strength of a god, then I am more concerned, not less. What happens when his will clashes with ours? Do we think he will bend the knee to any throne or war chief? Or will he decide his vision of justice outweighs mortal governance? Sylvanas' challenge hung in the air, and even Varian found himself grimly nodding. She had voiced the fear none wished to say. A being of such might could upend the world if not kept in check. High Overlord Saurfang, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward. His deep voice rumbled forth like distant thunder. In all my years of war, I have learned to judge allies by their deeds. This man from the sky saved our people without thought of reward or allegiance. Honor shines from him as plainly as the sun on his breast. The grizzled orc crossed his powerful arms and fixed Sylvanas with a hard stare. The Horde has no quarrel with such a one, so long as he remains honorable. Unspoken was his warning that if Kal-El did betray them, Saurfang would be the first to try to cut him down, unstoppable or not. Through the heated debate, Tirion had listened quietly. Now he struck the table with a mailed fist, not in anger, but to focus their attention. I have spoken with Kal-El at length, Tirion said. He asks for nothing but knowledge of our world and its plight. He came not as a conqueror, but as a protector seeking purpose. Are we to spurn such a gift out of fear? The High Lord's stern gaze settled on each leader in turn. We face the greatest evil of our age in Arthas Menethil. If we let fear of the unknown divide us now, we doom ourselves. Varian's expression softened slightly. Caution still burned in his eyes, but he inclined his head. You have spoken with him, Tirion. Tell us, what does he intend? Will he fight the Scourge alongside us? In answer, Tirion gestured to an Argent Crusade knight by the door. The doors of the chapel swung open, admitting a beam of daylight, and the very topic of their council. Kal-El stepped into the sacred hall, flanked by two paladins, ducking slightly under the doorframe. The room fell into a hush. Many who had not seen him before could not hide their astonishment. Even without shining armor or arcane vestments, the Kryptonian cut an impressive, noble figure. He had donned simple pilgrim's garb over his strange blue bodysuit, a plain tunic and cloak to cover the more outlandish aspects of his attire. Yet the red hem of his cape and the emblazoned symbol on his chest were still visible, proclaiming his unique identity. Here, in flesh and blood, and a bit of soot, stood the being of rumor and myth. King Varian, ever forthright, took a few bold steps forward to face the newcomer. The High King's guards bristled, but Varian raised a hand to stay them. He examined Kal-El appraisingly. You are Kal-El, the one from beyond the sky? Varian asked, his voice echoing in the vaulted chamber. Kal-El met Varian's gaze and, to the king's mild surprise, bowed his head respectfully in the manner of a knight to a liege. I am Kal-El, he answered, voice firm but courteous. I come from a world far from here, a world that no longer exists. I was brought to your shores by fate and accident, but perhaps also by purpose. I seek only to help. I have seen the darkness that plagues this land, and I will not stand idle while innocents suffer. He swept his clear, earnest eyes across the assembly. I offer my strength in the fight against this scourge. There was something undeniably pure in his declaration, a candid, heartfelt resolve that resonated with many in that hall of heroes. High Overlord Saurfang gave a single satisfied grunt. The corners of Varian's stern mouth twitched almost imperceptibly toward a smile. Even Sylvanas watched with narrowed eyes, searching for any hint of guile and finding none. Varian's voice lost some of its edge. Your willingness to aid us honors you, Kal-El. But understand, we have faced saviors before who became threats in turn. The king's mind flashed to tragic figures. The fallen Prince Arthas, once Lordaeron's hope. Medivh, the last guardian, whose good intentions unleashed the Orcish horde. Why should we trust that you will not do the same? Kal-El drew himself up, shoulders square, and spoke so all could hear. I was raised to believe that those with great power have a duty to protect those without. On my world, I use my abilities only to serve and defend. That has not changed. He looked around at the skeptical and the hopeful alike, his voice echoing like a clear bell. I have no desire for conquest or dominion. I seek no throne, no title. All I want is to help. Judge me by my actions. Nothing more, nothing less. A palpable wave of relief and admiration swept the room. Many who had fought beside legendary heroes felt something kindred in this man, a selflessness that could not be feigned. Tirion Fordring allowed a small, hopeful smile. Then it is settled. The High Lord clasped Kal-El's forearm, a gesture of alliance. If you would stand with us against the Lich King, we welcome you as brother in arms. Varian stepped forward and did likewise, clasping Kal-El's other arm in a warrior's handshake. The alliance will fight beside any who take up arms against the Scourge. The High King nodded, and respect shone in his eyes now. From the Horde side, Saurfang thumped his chest in salute. The Horde shall do the same. We will see how this Sky Warrior fares in true battle. A low chorus of agreement came from the other Horde delegates. Only Sylvanas remained silent and aloof, but even she offered a curt nod. In truth, the Banshee Queen's icy heart smoldered with hatred for Arthas. If this Kal-El could help bring him down, she would tolerate his presence. Still, her mind churned with contingency plans. Should the Kryptonian prove a threat later, how might she neutralize him? She kept those dark thoughts to herself. Tirion raised his hands, voice ringing with resolve. So be it. At dawn, we ride north. The combined might of the Argent Crusade, the Alliance, and the Horde will converge upon Icecrown Citadel. Together, with our sky-sent champion at our side, we will break the Lich King's power and end his reign of terror. A murmur of determination met his words. In that moment, factional rivalries were set aside. All eyes turned toward the inevitable confrontation with the Lord of the Dead. Thus, Alliance and Horde alike began to muster their forces for the coming battle in the frozen north. The fate of Azeroth would soon be decided at Icecrown. Dawn broke as Azeroth's united host assembled before the Icecrown Glacier. A vast undead horde poured forth to meet them. An endless tide of ghouls, necromancers, and winged frost worms streaming from the Citadel's gates. The combined Alliance Horde vanguard charged as one, battle cries of every nation echoing across the frozen plain. Knights of Stormwind galloped alongside Orc wolf riders, and Elven rangers loosed arrows in unison with troll headhunters. Overhead, dragons wheeled and dove. Red drakes and blue dragonflight survivors clashed with the Scourge's skeletal frost worms in the stormy skies. In the midst of the fray, Kal-El was everywhere at once, a blur of red cape and cobalt armor streaking through the legions of the dead. He soared upward to smash a gargantuan frost worm out of the air, then shot across the battlefield to rescue a cluster of embattled Argent Crusaders, his eyes unleashing searing beams that reduced the charging line of abominations to molten slag. The morale of the living surged whenever the Sky Champion appeared, and slowly, amid terrible losses, the forces of Azeroth pushed the Scourge back. Inch by bloody inch, they fought their way to the very foot of Icecrown Citadel's glacier. At last, the colossal gates of Icecrown creaked open with an icy thunder. From within the black maw of the citadel, mounted on a rampart of jagged ice, Arthas Menethil, the Lich King, emerged to survey the battlefield. Clad in spiked ebon armor and a tattered cloak of midnight, he stood with Frostmourne unsheathed in his gauntlet. The blade's eerie blue runes glowed with hunger. His helm's eye sockets burned with cold, malevolent light. There he stood, the master of death itself, flanked by 2 towering frost giants wielding blades of jagged serenite. An unnatural hush fell over the field as undead and living alike paused. The bitter wind howled between the opposing armies. For a heartbeat, even the red dragons ceased their fiery strafing, circling warily above. The Lich King gazed down upon the ranks of the living with contemptuous calm. When he finally spoke, his voice boomed across the glacier, amplified by sorcery, deep as a tomb and dripping with condescension. So, the heroes of Azeroth come to wrest victory from my grasp? Arthas's tone was almost amused. How quaint. You've delivered yourselves neatly to my doorstep. Sylvanas Windrunner knocked a black-fletched arrow, her face a mask of hatred. Your hour is over, Arthas, she screamed up at him, voice taut with years of vengeance. Others raised weapons, shouting defiance. The Lich King remained unfazed. Heroes, is it? No. Lambs to the slaughter. He lifted Frostmourne high. Witness the end of your hope. With that, he gestured sharply. The 2 frost giant guardians lumbered forward off the rampart and waded into the front line with earth-shaking steps, swinging their immense rune-carved swords. At the same time, Arthas himself descended the icy steps, entering the fray like a dark god stepping down from his throne. A great clamor arose as battle was joined anew, but this was no mindless horde the living faced now. These were the Scourge's mightiest champions, led by the Death King himself. One frost giant cleaved through an entire phalanx of Alliance spearmen in a single swing, scattering men like ragdolls. The other unleashed a bellowing frost breath, encasing Horde berserkers in jagged ice. Varian Wrynn darted forward with preternatural agility, his royal blade Charlemagne slicing a deep gouge in a giant's ankle to draw its attention. High Lord Tirion, astride his charger, raced towards the other, the holy Ashbringer blazing in his hands as he carved chunks of necrotic flesh from the colossal foe. Around them, other heroes swarmed, buying time, seeking any weakness in the Titans. Kal-El rocketed into the melee, colliding with one giant's helm in a devastating flying punch. The massive creature's head snapped backward, teeth and shards of ice flying from its maw. Yet still it stood, swinging blindly in rage. We bring this one down together, Kal-El shouted, voice cutting through the chaos. King Varian answered with a rallying cry, and a knot of Alliance and Horde fighters converged around the staggering giant. Saurfang charged with his axe, striking behind the beast's knee, while a chorus of elven sorcerers bombarded its chest with arcane missiles. The giant groaned and toppled like a felled tree, crashing to the ice. Across the field, the second frost giant spewed another cone of icy death. Dozens of fighters were frozen where they stood, expressions of fear locked behind frosted visors. High Lord Tirion barreled through that deadly mist encased in a golden aura of light, Ashbringer held aloft. With a thunderous blow, he struck the giant's sword arm, severing it at the elbow in a blast of holy fire. As the Colossus reeled, Kal-El streaked in from behind and drove it to its knees with a titanic shoulder slam. A chorus of battle cries rose from the allies as the second giant fell in a heap of stone-hard flesh. The path to Arthas was now clear. The Lich King stood in the midst of swirling snow and cinders, finally face to face with those who dared defy him. Around him, the battle raged on. Sylvanas and her Forsaken Rangers dueled clusters of Scourge elites. Dwarven riflemen picked off Crypt Lords, skittering at the edges. A flight of Alliance Griffin Riders clashed with a swarm of gargoyles above them. But in a wide circle around Arthas, space opened. None dared come between the living legends closing in and the Dark Lord himself. Kal-El landed before the Lich King, boots crunching on the bloody ice. The two stood a moment in stark contrast, one wreathed in a faint halo of daylight reflecting off his red cape, the other shrouded in a black aura of deathly cold. Arthas Menethil, Kal-El called out, voice strong. Your reign of terror ends here. Surrender and release these lands from your curse. It was the last offer of mercy he would make. Arthas tilted his head as if amused. Behind his fearsome helm, the once prince's lips curled in a sneer. You presume to command me, alien, he spat. Frostmourn's blade raised and leveled at Kal-El. The souls trapped in the sword moaned in unison, sensing blood. No man, no matter how powerful, can stand against the wrath of the Lich King. In a blur, Arthas struck. Frostmourn met Kal-El's upraised forearms with a resounding clang that echoed like a death knell. The force of the blow cracked the ice under Kal-El's feet and drove him back a step. His first real test against a weapon of true evil. Cold radiated from the rune blade, biting into even his sun-warm skin. Kal-El gritted his teeth. He had stopped the lethal edge, but for the first time on Azeroth, he felt pain from an enemy's strike. He countered with a blistering heat vision blast aimed at Arthas's sword arm, hoping to disable him quickly. The twin beams of red-hot energy lanced out, striking the Lich King's pauldron and helm. Steam hissed from the impact, and bits of Arthas's cloak caught fire, but the dark runes across his armor flared, absorbing and dispersing much of the heat. Arthas lunged through the haze, slashing furiously. Kal-El ducked and weaved at superhuman speed. Even so, the tip of Frostmourn grazed his side once, twice, each time tearing the strange blue fabric of his suit and leaving a thin line of blood glowing golden against his skin. The sight of Superman's blood, albeit a few shining drops, emboldened the watching undead and struck a pang of fear in the hearts of the living. If even he could bleed, could he fall? But Kal-El fought on unfazed. A lifetime of battles against monsters and tyrants on other worlds had taught him to persevere. He caught Arthas's next swing, palms clamping onto the flat of Frostmourn's blade, halting it inches from his face. The two adversaries strained in deadlock. The Lich King's eyes flared with cold fury, Kal-El's with righteous determination. Meanwhile, around them, the most valiant heroes of Azeroth sought to tip the balance. High Lord Tirion circled behind the Lich King, chanting a prayer as Ashbringer's holy light intensified. King Varian charged in from the side, sword drawn back for a strike at Arthas's exposed flank. Sylvanas knocked an arrow infused with banshee wailing, loosing it straight at the slits of the Lich King's helm. Arthas reacted with preternatural speed. With a pulse of will, he unleashed remorseless winter, a wave of killing cold that exploded outward from his armor. The air itself froze. Shockingly sharp crystals of ice blossomed on weapons, on flesh. Varian's swing faltered as he was driven back by the sheer physical force of the blizzard. Sylvanas' arrow was caught mid-flight and shattered into frost. Tirion, protected somewhat by the light, pressed on, though rime coated his beard and pauldrons. The Lich King growled and twisted his sword free from Kal-El's grip by brute strength, then thrust out his gauntlet. From his splayed fingers erupted tendrils of necromantic shadow, Frostmourn's unseen hunger given form. The snaking tendrils pierced into Kal-El's chest like spectral vipers. Superman gasped, eyes widening in shock. These were no mere chains. They were extensions of Frostmourn's curse, seeking to ensnare his very soul. A terrible agony racked Kal-El. The world around him dimmed as if a cloud passed over the sun. He heard the distant screams of countless souls, felt cold fingers clawing at the edges of his mind, drawing him toward oblivion. Arthas's hollow voice cut through the haze. Look at you, so full of light. I will enjoy extinguishing it. With a wrenching motion, the Lich King began to siphon Kal-El's life force. The Kryptonian dropped to one knee, muscles trembling, struggling against an invisible doom. The allied champions cried out in alarm. Jaina Proudmoore, who had arrived with a cadre of Kirin Tor mages, began weaving a spell to break the dark bindings. High Lord Tirion rushed forward, raising Ashbringer for a decisive strike while Arthas was focused on his prey. Arthas snarled and, without even looking, flung a backhand of crackling death magic that smashed Tirion aside. The veteran paladin was sent hurtling, holy aura flickering, and he hit the ground with a grievous crunch. Ashbringer slipped from his grasp, skidding across the ice not far from Kal-El. Seeing Tirion fall, High Overlord Saurfang roared in fury. The mighty orc charged Arthas head-on, axe held high. "For Draenor! For my son!" Saurfang's weapon came down in a tremendous arc, cleaving into the Lich King's side, biting between plates of serenite. Arthas bellowed in pain and annoyance, momentarily releasing his shadowy grasp on Kal-El. In retaliation, Arthas drove Frostmourne straight through Saurfang's chest, impaling the orc chieftain. Saurfang staggered, blood spilling from his lips. With a contemptuous boot, Arthas kicked the dying orc off his blade. "Such a waste," the Lich King hissed. But Saurfang's heroic interference had given Kal-El the precious seconds needed to rally. As the soul-draining tendril slackened, he summoned every remaining ounce of will. "No, I will not submit," he roared in his mind. Planting his feet firmly, Kal-El tore free of the ethereal bonds with a burst of sheer, unyielding resolve. The shadow chain snapped, dissolving into dark mist. Arthas whirled back, startled that his spell had been broken. Kal-El rose shakily to his feet. He was weakened. The normally invulnerable hero felt truly mortal in that moment. Every muscle afire, a cold sweat on his brow. But his eyes blazed defiance. At Kal-El's feet, a golden gleam caught his eye. Ashbringer, Tyrion's legendary blade of the light, lay within arm's reach, faintly glowing against the ice. Instinctively, Kal-El reached down and grasped its hilt. The crystal sword pulsed in his hand, as if recognizing a worthy spirit. A surge of warmth coursed up through Kal-El's arms. Arthas snarled and rushed forward to strike Kal-El down before he could recover. But with Ashbringer in hand, the Kryptonian felt new strength flood his limbs. Not the raw solar energy of his birthright, but the blessed power of the light lending fire to his weary body. In one fluid motion, he raised the holy blade just in time to catch Frostmourne's downward swing. Clang. The collision of the two legendary weapons sent a shockwave of light and darkness rolling across the glacier. Ashbringer, borne by Superman's steady hand, held firm. Frostmourne's cursed edge met the unbreakable resolve of pure light and cracks spiderwebbed along the length of the runeblade. Arthas's eyes widened in disbelief as his mighty sword, the source of his dominion, splintered under the impact. Kal-El seized the moment. With a triumphant shout, he channeled every remaining bit of his strength and the light's fury through Ashbringer. He thrust the blade forward, driving it through a weak joint in Arthas's armor and deep into the Lich King's black heart. Holy light erupted from the wound as Ashbringer pierced its foe. Arthas's roar of anger turned to one of agony, echoing across the silent battlefield. Frostmourne fell from Arthas's grasp and shattered upon the ice, releasing a torrent of trapped souls in a rush of blinding light. The Lich King reeled as his stolen power was torn away. Arthas staggered and fell to his knees. In his final moments, his eyes briefly cleared, free of the darkness at last, before he collapsed upon the frozen ground, lifeless. The Lich King was no more. A stunned silence followed. Then a great cheer rose from the combined armies as they realized what had happened. The Lich King was defeated. Some laughed in relief, others openly wept. Varian dropped to one knee beside the fallen Saurfang, cradling the orc's body with respect, even as life faded from the Horde hero's eyes. Jaina rushed to Tyrion's side, helping the grievously injured High Lord stand. He lived, barely, thanks to the light's grace. Kal-El stepped back, breathing heavily, Ashbringer still glowing in his hand. His vision swam. Exhaustion and the wounds of both body and soul beset him. But he yet stood. Around him, soldiers from every kingdom converged, their faces alight with gratitude and disbelief. He offered Varian a tired smile, and the king clasped his shoulder in silent thanks. Sylvanas approached the corpse of Arthas, arrow nocked, but seeing the empty, pale face of her hated foe, she simply lowered her bow. Arthas Menethil died not by her hand, but he was dead, and for the first time in her unlife, the Banshee Queen felt a glimmer of peace and an unsettling emptiness where her vengeance had been. But even in that victorious moment, fate had another twist in store. Without warning, the victory celebration turned to terror. The bruised skies above Ice-Crown Citadel tore open, scarred by a churning swirl of fell fire. A massive demonic gateway materialized in the air, vomiting green flame. From this burning portal thundered Kil'jaeden the Deceiver, a demon lord of the Burning Legion and architect of the Lich King's creation. His colossal form, crimson skin, burning eyes, and horned wings spread wide, eclipsed what remained of the stormy sky, and in his wake poured a host of infernal horrors, meteoric infernals crashing to the ground, towering doom guards with hellish blades, and swarms of chittering fellbats. A jolt of dread shot through the allied armies. They had not expected another enemy, certainly not the Legion itself, at this final hour. Exhausted soldiers lifted their weapons once more, forming ragged lines as fellfire rained down around them. Victory had been within reach moments ago. Now it seemed to slip like sand through their fingers. Kil'jaeden's voice boomed across the glacier like an infernal horn. "Pitiful mortals," he roared, his deep tones crackling with contempt. "Did you think your triumph would go unchallenged? Your world and its champion will belong to the Burning Legion." With a sweep of his claw, he commanded his demon horde forward. Kal-El, weary and wounded, nevertheless rose again into the sky to meet this new threat. He had scant strength left. The battle with Arthas had pushed him beyond mortal limits, but he refused to let Azeroth fall now. He flew at Kil'jaeden like an oncoming comet and delivered a staggering punch to the demon's jaw. Kil'jaeden barely flinched. With horrifying speed, the Deceiver's massive hand lashed out and grabbed Kal-El in midair. Clawed fingers closed around the Kryptonian, caging him. A collective gasp went up from the battlefield. Those who had moments ago been cheering now watched in horror as their greatest hero was caught like a mere insect. Kal-El struggled, prying at Kil'jaeden's fingers, but the demon lord's strength rivaled even his own, and Kal-El's energy was nearly spent. A cruel grin split Kil'jaeden's monstrous face. "I will break you, little godling," he snarled. Green fell flames ignited in his palm, engulfing Kal-El in burning agony. For the first time, a cry of pain was torn from the Man of Steel's lips. The fell fire, pure demonic hatred made flame, seared even his mighty flesh, draining what strength remained. On the glacier below, Varian Wrynn's heart clenched. The Alliance King looked to Jaina and the other mages desperately. "We have to help him," he shouted. Jaina's eyes brimmed with tears of frustration. She was nearly spent of magic, and what spells she mustered splashed harmlessly against the demon's field aura. Around them, demons crashed into the lines. A mighty infernal pounded a siege engine to scrap before being blasted apart by gnomish explosives. Felguards and undead ghouls strangely fought side by side by coincidence, each slashing at the living. The battlefield descended into chaos once more. But this time the mortal armies were badly depleted. Despair threatened to take hold. High above, Kil'jaeden tightened his fiery grasp. Kal-El's vision blurred as waves of sickening green flame rolled over him. For all his indomitable will, his body was failing. His iconic red cape now tattered and scorched, his arms trembling as he tried to pry himself free. Is this how it ends? He wondered distantly, anguish for these people outweighing concern for himself. I cannot fall, not when they need me most. But darkness encroached on the edges of his mind. In that moment, Something answered his silent plea. Beneath Kal-El's scorched tunic, hanging against his chest, a small crystal shard he had picked up from the battlefield began to glow with a gentle golden light. It was a fragment of pure light, a Naru shard, dislodged when Frostmourne was shattered. Now, in his dire need, it resonated with his unyielding hope. Suddenly, a pillar of luminance burst from the sky, striking Kil'jaeden's hand and Kal-El within it. The Demon Lord recoiled with a roar as holy light seared his unholy flesh. His grip loosened just enough, and Kal-El slipped free, tumbling through the air before catching himself a few yards above the ground. He hovered there unsteadily, bathed in the cascading beam of radiance pouring down from the heavens. The shard at his chest flared brighter, and within that column of light, time seemed to slow. Kal-El felt a presence enfold him, warm and loving, unlike any power he'd touched before. It was as though the light itself cradled his wounded spirit. "My child," came a gentle, wordless voice in his heart. "Your work is not finished. Will you accept my gift? Will you become what you were meant to be?" In this timeless heartbeat, Kal-El understood. The holy light, source of all that is good on Azeroth, was offering him the strength to save this world. With tears of reverence in his eyes, Kal-El answered yes. He opened himself fully to the light's embrace. At once, the golden beam thickened and blazed even more radiantly, enveloping him in a cocoon of pure illumination. Those on the ground had to shield their eyes from the brilliance. Kil'jaeden snarled and cast bolts of shadow into the column, but they fizzled to nothing. Inside that pillar of radiance, Kal-El felt his pain and weariness ebb away, replaced by invigorating warmth. The deep burns on his skin vanished as if kissed by a healing sun. His torn attire wove itself whole again, the blue and red brightening and now trimmed with streaks of white gold light. The very S shield on his chest glowed softly, as though freshly sanctified. When the pillar of light finally receded, Kal-El emerged reborn, hovering a few feet above the ice, clad in glory. His eyes shone with a serene, golden light, and a faint aura like wings of sunlight unfurled from his shoulders for an instant before settling. Gasps of awe rippled through friend and foe alike. Superman had become the sanctified champion of the light. For a moment, even the demons hesitated, cowed by the holy power emanating from this new being. Kil'jaeden's shock quickly curdled into fury. "Insolent gnat," he howled. The deceiver unleashed a torrent of field fire from his maw, a green inferno set to consume Kal-El entirely. Yet as the flames washed over the Kryptonian's radiant form, they broke upon an invisible shield of light and scattered harmlessly. Kal-El plunged forward through the fell blaze, drawing back his fist. He struck Kil'jaeden with a sunlit punch that landed like a hammer of the gods. The Demon Lord's colossal frame reeled back, bones cracking under the blow. Kil'jaeden snarled and swung his clawed arm, wreathed in shadow, to swat the nuisance away. But Kal-El caught the incoming arm. The two grappled in midair, one an engine of fell fury, the other a beacon of the light. Inch by inch, Superman forced Kil'jaeden's arm aside. All across the glacier, the battle turned. Seeing their shining champion holding his own against the deceiver ignited a second wind in the weary defenders. Dwarves and Taurens fought back to back, smashing apart Felguards. Night Elf priestesses lifted their voices in hymns to Elune, bolstering their allies with healing moonlight. Even High Lord Tirion, broken but alive, raised a trembling hand to cheer as he saw the miracle unfolding in the sky. Kil'jaeden was enraged beyond reason. He summoned all his remaining might. Fell energy crackled around him chaotically. Realizing brute force alone might fail, the cunning Eridar opted for escape. Better to retreat and regroup than be defeated here. In a desperate move, the Demon Lord wrenched free of Kal-El's hold with a burst of hellish power and beat his immense wings to ascend toward the Stillipin portal above. "You will not escape," Kal-El's voice rang out, clear and commanding. He rocketed after the fleeing Demion, a streak of white gold light against the sickly green sky. In a blink, he caught up to kill Jaden just at the threshold of the Legion's gateway. The demon snarled, half inside the swirling void, one massive hand gripping the portal's edge. Kal-El seized that wrist with both hands, bracing with all his might. With a final, earth-shaking heave, he hurled Kil'jaeden backward into the portal's depths, plunging the demon fully into the twisting nether beyond. In that same instant, Kal-El crossed the portal's event horizon, deliberately chasing the deceiver into the nether to ensure he could not return. From the glacier below, the army saw a last blinding flash of light from within the fell gateway. Then, with a deafening crack, the portal imploded upon itself. The hellish rift snapped shut, its violent collapse shaking the very air and extinguishing the unnatural storm clouds overhead. Silence fell over Icecrown. The demons that remained were cut off from their leadership and immediately thrown into disarray. Some winked out of existence as the fiel magics binding them waned. Others were swiftly cut down by the victorious, if baffled, mortal warriors. Kil'jaeden was gone. The Burning Legion's invasion had been halted as abruptly as it began. And Superman, Azeroth's champion, he too was nowhere to be seen. A pall of silence hung over Icecrown Glacier. The living armies stood battered and bloodied, staring at the empty sky where the portal had collapsed and their savior had vanished. Slowly, realization dawned. Against all odds, the scourge was broken and the Legion's onslaught was foiled. Azeroth was saved, but its greatest champion had paid the price. One by one, warriors of every race knelt in respect and mourning. Leaders and soldiers alike bowed their heads. In that moment of grief, there were no alliance or horde, only one people, united in mourning a fallen hero. They knew they had witnessed the end of a legend and the birth of perhaps the greatest myth their world would ever know. In the weeks that followed, a great memorial was erected in the eastern Plaguelands where Kal-El had first crash-landed. Alliance masons and Horde craftsmen worked side by side to raise a statue of the sky-fallen hero. The tale of his arrival, heroism, and sacrifice spread to every tavern and temple, inspiring new hope that transcended old hatreds. For a time, even age-old enmities softened in the face of what he had taught them about courage and unity. Many an eve, when the night was clear, people across Azeroth would look toward the heavens. There, high above the icy crown of Northrend, a new star twinkled brightly against the darkness. The wise claimed it appeared on the very night of Kal-El's disappearance. All across the world, people would point to that light and whisper that it was the soul of the Man of Steel, watching over Azeroth from the heavens. Though scholars debated its origin, among common folk the star became known as the Guardian's Lamp, a celestial reminder of hope in times of despair. Though Kal-El was gone, his impact on Azeroth proved everlasting. He had arrived a stranger from beyond the sky, yet he departed as a mythic hero enshrined in the world's history. The grim saga of that war, the fall of the Lich King and the thwarting of the Legion, would be told for generations, and at its heart would shine the last son of Krypton, who became Azeroth's brightest champion. And so ends the sacred chronicle of Superman in Azeroth, forever the light's chosen warrior and this world's eternal guardian among the stars.